I'm Jay Templin here in James Fort, and today we're going to discuss an agricultural tool known as the breast plow. So one of the sort of persistent myths about Jamestown in the early days is that these men were woefully unprepared for the task of feeding themselves. I often hear people say, why did they have a starving time? Why didn't they grow food? They did, or at least they tried. But when these guys came over from England in 1607, they arrived in the middle of the worst drought in 800 years, and they were farming in an entirely different environment and climate than they were accustomed to. One of the big problems is that traditional European agriculture is based very heavily on the use of draft animals, right? We've just sort of gotten away from the medieval system of raising your crops in a 3-field rotation. They're starting to move to a 2-field rotation with cover crops and green manures and things like this to improve yield, but it's all based on having horses or oxen that you can use to draw your plow through the field. And they didn't bring any when they came, in large part because they knew that they were coming into an area where you wouldn't have the sort of pasturage that these animals require. So how do you plow and plant crops like wheat and oats if you don't have an animal to pull the plow? You could hook people up and have them pull the plow, but that would be pretty rough. There's another method that can be used. When the archaeologists at the original site are digging outside the east wall of the original fort in that earliest layer of English occupation, they found furrows left in the soil, evidence of agriculture. And the furrows have sort of an unusual zigzag configuration. For years, it had been assumed that they were doing this with hoes, and that is one possibility. But there's another tool that most people today don't know about, which we've recreated here at Jamestown. This is a breast plow. Now, the breast plow is something that is hard to pin down in the historical record. We have late medieval references to it, but no pictures. We have 18th and 19th century surviving examples, but for the 17th century, we've got nothing really about them particularly. In Ireland and in Scotland, they're used in English border counties where you've got sort of a mountainous or hilly terrain that doesn't allow you to use a horse or a cow to pull your plow conveniently. These are often used, and they're used for harvesting turf as well. So the breast plow is an iron plowshare with this cutting flange to one side, typically the left. It's sharpened in the front edge, and then it mounts onto a long handle. The majority of them have a Y-shaped fork back here that will then stick through 2 holes in the handle. You don't see too many of this kind, but I didn't have a good forked stick to use for the handle. So this, as you've seen, is used by pushing it typically from a little lower than the breast, from about the belly or even the upper thighs, and you shove it into the ground and then twist it to flip the clod of soil over. You could do much the same thing with hoes, going along and sort of swinging these to chop that furrow into the soil, but the breast plow is more in line with the sort of practice that they use for the agriculture in Europe, for getting a large field turned over so that you can harrow it and plant your crops. Once you've run your plow back and forth across the field, you've turned up furrows with large clumps of soil, and those need to be broken up to create a smoother surface for better seed to soil contact. The harrow has been the answer since the dawn of agriculture. The earliest versions we know of were literally just branches being drug across a freshly plowed field to sort of smooth it out. The harrow that I've got here is a style that's dead common from Roman times right up through the one that my uncle had when I was a kid was not much different than this. You drag this behind you and it just, like a giant rake, smooths everything out for you. In the instructions by way of advice, they tell these men, when you get to Virginia, divide your force into 3 groups and have one start clearing land and planting your crops. We know they brought seeds with them, so it's not like they weren't trying to grow some things here. But when you come right down to it, Jamestown is basically a military base. It's a working outpost. You expect these men to get most of their supplies from home. This is more by way of supplementing that, so you've got a local source of supply as well as the stuff from overseas. And it's also going to allow them to experiment with the crops they're used to back home so that they can learn what will grow here. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and Plowshare. Leave us a comment below.
Jay, what seems to be wrong?
The deer ate the oat field!